The morning was cold and still at Windsor Castle. A thin mist sat low over the gardens, and the grass was wet from the night before. Most of the staff had not yet started their day. The long corridors were quiet, and the only sound was the soft footsteps of a security guard making his way toward the main administration office. He was carrying something in his hand, a sealed envelope. He placed it on the desk, turned around, and walked away. He never came back. His name was never shared with the public. He had worked as a royal protection officer for more than 20 years. He had stood outside palace doors, walked quietly behind royal cars, and kept watch at garden gates during private family moments. He was the kind of man that no one noticed, which was exactly the point. For 2 decades, he had seen things that most people would never see. He had kept every one of those things to himself. Until now. Inside that envelope was a handwritten letter. It was addressed to one person only, Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, the only daughter of the late Queen Elizabeth II. The letter was not long. It was not dramatic. It was calm, clear, and deeply honest. And within 2 days of Princess Anne reading it, something inside the royal household quietly but firmly began to change. To understand why this moment mattered, one must first understand who Princess Anne is. She is not the most talked about member of the royal family. She does not give long interviews. She does not post on social media. She does not explain herself to the press. What she does, year after year, is work. She carries out more official engagements than almost any other member of the family. She travels, she speaks, she represents, and she does all of it without asking for applause. She is, in the truest sense, someone who gets things done. She is also known for something else. She is honest. Not rude, not unkind, but honest in a way that is rare in any institution, and especially rare in one that has survived for centuries by learning the art of saying very little. People who have met her often describe the same experience. She looks at you directly, she listens carefully, and when she speaks, she means exactly what she says. She does not soften things that do not need to be softened. She does not hide things that deserve to be said out loud. It was this quality, this quiet refusal to look away from the truth, that the guard had been counting on when he wrote his letter. Princess Charlotte was 11 years old at the time. She was the second child of Prince William, the Prince of Wales, and Princess Catherine. To the public, she was adored. Her birthday photographs were celebrated across the world. Her appearances at royal events drew warm and genuine smiles from the crowds. She had her mother's calm grace and her father's easy warmth, and she carried herself with a confidence that seemed remarkable for someone her age. People often remarked on it, how poised she was, how composed, how sure of herself. But confidence and composure, when they appear too early in a child, do not always mean what they seem to mean. Sometimes they mean something else entirely. Sometimes they mean that a child has learned, faster than she should have, how to hold herself together. The guard had watched Charlotte closely over the years, as was his duty. He had seen her at public events, during family gatherings, and in the quiet in-between moments that the cameras never captured. What he observed over time was not a child who was carelessly unhappy. She was not suffering in any dramatic way. She was loved by her parents, that was clear. She was protected, educated, cared for. But she was also growing up at the center of something enormous, a royal family under the kind of global attention that even most adults would find difficult to manage, and the weight of that was something she had quietly been asked to carry in ways that seemed, to him, too heavy for her age. There had been a moment, roughly 2 years before he wrote the letter, that had stayed with him. Charlotte had been asked to appear at a public event during a period when the family was going through a particularly tense time behind closed doors. She was 9 years old. Backstage, before the event began, he had seen her face. Not the face she showed the crowd, the bright, ready, public face, but the real one, in the moment before she put the public one on. She looked tired. She looked as though she was carrying something she had not been given a choice about carrying. He had watched an aide lean down and say something to her quietly, and he had watched her nod, straighten her shoulders, and walk forward. She had been perfect. The crowd had loved her. The photographs had been wonderful. And the guard had gone home that evening and sat in his kitchen for a long time, thinking about a 9-year-old girl who had just performed composure as a professional duty. He did not write the letter immediately. He thought about it for a long time. He turned it over in his mind for months, asking himself whether what he had seen was truly concerning or whether he was reading too much into ordinary moments. He asked himself whether it was his place to say anything at all. He was a protection officer. His job was to keep people physically safe. But the longer he sat with what he had seen, the more certain he became that what he was watching was something that deserved to be named. He had considered going to his superiors. He had thought about it carefully and dismissed it. Not because his superiors were bad people, they were not, but because he had spent enough time inside large institutions to understand how information traveled through them. He knew that a concern raised through official channels would be received, reviewed, noted, and very likely absorbed into the system without changing very much at all. He did not want his concern absorbed. He wanted it heard. And so he chose Princess Anne. He chose her because of everything he had observed about her across 2 decades. He had watched her handle difficult situations with a steadiness that he deeply respected. He had seen her refuse, more than once, to go along with something she considered wrong simply because it was easier to go along with it. He had watched her speak plainly to people who expected to be flattered and walk away from conversations that were going nowhere. She was, in his estimation, the one person inside the institution who would read his letter not as a problem to be managed but as a human truth that deserved a human response. He was right. Princess Anne read the letter 3 times. People who were near her during that period say she was unusually quiet in the days that followed, not troubled in a visible way, but thinking. She had the look of someone who has been handed a piece of information that confirmed something they already sensed but had not yet named. She made 2 phone calls. The first was to Prince William. The second was to a senior member of the household staff. Both calls were short. Both were direct. What was said in those conversations has never been publicly disclosed, and it almost certainly never will be. The royal family does not discuss these things in public, and Princess Anne, in particular, operates on a principle that actions speak far more clearly than explanations. But the conversations happened. And the days that followed them were different from the days that came before. Changes began to take place, small ones, quiet ones, the kind that leave no trace in any official record. A number of Charlotte's upcoming public commitments were reorganized. New guidelines were quietly introduced around how the younger members of the family were prepared for and supported through public engagements. Princess Anne herself began appearing at the Wales family home with a frequency and informality that those close to the family noticed. She was not making official visits. She was simply being present, in the way that a trusted older relative is present when a family needs one. She spent time with Charlotte directly. Not in any formal or structured way, not as a lesson, not as a duty, but in the easy, ordinary way that people who care about each other spend time together. They walked. They talked about things that had nothing to do with royal schedules or public appearances. And had a gift for this kind of attention. She gave it without making it feel like a project. She was simply there, and she was interested, and she did not require Charlotte to perform anything at all. Those who were around Charlotte during this period observed something that they found quietly moving. She began, slowly, to relax. The composure that had always been there remained, it was part of who she was, but the effort behind it seemed to ease. She laughed more easily. She pushed back on small things in the cheerful, confident way that children her age should push back on things. One person who saw her regularly during those months put it simply, she began to take up a little more space. For a child in her position, that was not a small thing. It was, in fact, everything. The guard who had started all of this had by then moved quietly into private life. He did not give interviews. He did not reach out to the press. He had done what he felt he needed to do, and it had been received by the person he had meant to receive it, and that was enough. He was not looking for credit. He was not looking for recognition. He was a man who had spent 2 decades standing quietly in the background of other people's lives, and he was entirely comfortable continuing to do so. Princess Anne never spoke publicly about the letter. She was asked once, in the indirect way that royal correspondents sometimes use when they are trying to approach a sensitive subject without naming it directly, about how the family supported its youngest members. She paused for a moment. She looked at the journalist with the calm, level gaze of someone who has already decided exactly how much she is going to say. Then she said, simply, that the children were being looked after. And she moved on to the next question. In the language of the royal family, in the particular vocabulary of a woman who says precisely what she means and nothing more, that sentence was not a deflection. It was an answer. The children were being looked after. She had made sure of it. The matter, as far as she was concerned, was settled. There is something worth sitting with in this story. It is not a story about scandal. It is not a story about conflict or blame. No one in it is a villain. It is, at its heart, a story about what happens when one ordinary person, a man with no title, no public profile, and nothing to gain, decides that what he has seen deserves to be said. And about what happens when the right person receives that truth and does something with it. The institutions that surround powerful families are, by their nature, designed to protect those families from the outside world. That is their purpose, and they do it well. But sometimes the thing that needs protecting is not the family's image or its schedule or its public reputation. Sometimes it is simply a child who needs someone to notice that she is tired, and to say, clearly, without ceremony, without waiting for the right moment, that things are going to be different now. Princess Anne noticed. She said so. And things were different. Charlotte continued to grow up in the full brightness of public life. She was still photographed, still watched, still discussed by people all over the world who felt, in the particular way that people feel about royal children, that they knew her. She remained composed and warm and capable of the kind of easy smile that made crowds feel genuinely glad to see her. None of that changed. But those who were close to her could see the difference, not in the big, dramatic things, but in the small ones. In the way she moved through a room. In the way she responded when someone asked her a question she was not sure she wanted to answer. In the simple, unremarkable, deeply important fact that she seemed, more than before, like a child who was allowed to be a child. That is the story. There are no dramatic confrontations in it. There is no single moment where everything breaks open and the truth is finally spoken in front of everyone. There is only a letter, written by a man who cared enough to be honest. A woman who received it and was willing to act on it. And a young girl who, in the months that followed, slowly found a little more room to breathe. Princess Anne has spent her entire life refusing to be silent about things that matter. She has done it in her public work, showing up year after year to causes that do not receive much attention, speaking plainly about issues that others prefer to handle gently. She has done it in her private dealings, in the direct way she communicates with everyone around her. And she did it here, in a matter that never became public, in a quiet chain of events that left no official record behind. That, perhaps, is the most honest measure of a person. Not what they do when the world is watching, but what they do when no one will ever know. Princess Anne had always known the difference. And in this case, as in so many others, she chose to act, not for recognition, not for credit, but simply because it was the right thing to do. The mist had long since cleared from the Windsor Gardens by the time all of this played out. The corridors were busy again, the way they always are, full of the quiet industry of people doing their jobs. Charlotte was at home with her family, doing the ordinary things that children do. And somewhere, in private life, a former royal guard was going about his days with the particular peace of a man who had told the truth to the right person and watched it matter. Some stories do not end with noise. Some of the most important ones end like this, gently, without announcement, in the simple dignity of a thing that was broken being quietly put right.